Hey everybody, welcome back to Ink and Effort, where we turn your writing dreams into a productive reality, one page at a time. I'm James Fox, I'm your host, and here we are, episode 2. Very excited about this. We had a lot of fun last week with Amy talking about the importance of getting into the flow, getting into that stream of consciousness that really amplifies your writing and allows you to put words on the page. And that's what we're about here. We want to get your butt in the chair, your hands on the keys, and words on the page. That's the whole point. If you want to be a writer, if you want to be an author, that's what you got to do. And here at Ink and Effort, our goal is to break that down for you. And it's not just success stories. It's just not just who's doing the right things. It's the challenges involved. I mean, I struggle as an author. I have a lot of trouble converting the single idea that I have onto the page because I've got like 500 other ideas happening at the same time, and that's my burden. That's my tragic flaw as a character, is that I have so many ideas that they're all vying for that front row seat. And when I put my hands on the keys, the first thing I have to do is, what story am I working on today? Am I writing a script? Am I writing a TV show? Am I working on a reality TV show? Am I playing video games? Because that happens too. And that tumultuous kind of like storm cloud of creativity can actually cause more damage than is good. I bounce around between projects quite a lot, and I have found kind of a rhythm in that. Hey, I'm feeling funny today, I'm going to work on my comedy. Hey, I'm feeling dark today, I'm going to work on my psychological thriller. Hey, I'm normal, I'm going to be writing sci-fi, because that's my like, my current. That's my main current. So today our special guest is a very unique person who struggles mightily with the same kind of things that I struggle with. And I thought that it would be great because we've worked together for a long time now, like 15 years or something. And we have that like creative synergy that like just comes together in this maelstrom of perfection. If only we could get it to land on the page. We come up with some of the best ideas as two creatives I've ever worked with, period, bar none. Like, we go off and we fly off, and it's like, oh my god, not only did we just solve world hunger, but we absolutely like discovered the meaning of life, and we have a great story. Only we don't write any of it down, and we don't take diligent notes, and we start playing video games together afterwards to congratulate ourselves on a job well done. And it's like, wait, what was that idea we had, right? So I thought you'd be a really great guest to bring on. And first of all, I can showcase some of that like insane creativity out of this man, and really kind of talk to the challenges of what it's like to work in an environment where you have so many good ideas that it's almost impossible to filter them down to and crystallize them into a finished product. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome our guest, Dano Colon. Welcome, Dano.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. We've worked together for a really long time, you and I.
Yep.
And how many concurrent projects do you have right now that are unfinished?
Can't count them. If I had to approximate, counting everything that I've ever started and not finished, including things where I have a Google Doc where I have a little folder called writing, and then there's 100 folders inside of it, and each of them is a different project idea. And some of those folders, you open it up and there's just a Word document, and you open the Word document and it says, picture a saloon. It's generally light colored. As situations escalate, and as someone who's sitting inside of the saloon the whole time plays sides against each other and has people coming to them with conflicts, one by one murders occur, and by the end of the thing the saloon is red, and that's the whole document. And it's like, well, okay, that's an idea, write it. And I don't. So counting projects like that, if I had to guess, I'd say I have under my belt about 7 novels, 6 TV series, and probably 13 movies. As far as screenplays or novels or TV series pilot episodes that are within a reasonable approximation of being complete, maybe like one of each.
Okay. And and I mean, like I said, we've worked together. I mean, you've been involved in the Soul project since almost its inception.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that I found with you is you're kind of a binge writer. You kind
Hmm.
of like build up these ideas for a long time, then you put this like self-imposed like come hell or high water deadline on yourself, and then just like vanish for 48 hours and then come back with a finished screenplay,
Yep.
or a mostly finished screenplay. Is that your process? Like, is that the way you like to do things, or is that just kind of like how it works out?
I would describe it, I would describe it more as like a result of the way I work creatively, regardless of how I wish I worked creatively, because a lot of the way I work creatively has to do with like I come up with an idea, and that idea is usually like a moment or, a series of moments that follow a trajectory leading to a conclusion. And then I have to write everything that creates that moment or that series of moments, or I have to start laying the foundation to build up to it. Um, and what that ends up looking like is a burst of inspiration. And if I can sit down and while that inspiration is happening, get everything down that I can, the more the better, because what ends up happening is as soon as that burst of inspiration is gone, I have nothing. And I'm frozen. And if I try to revisit the idea and going back to I the thing I said about the room is something that kind of popped into my head this morning. I was thinking about this podcast and I was thinking about projects that you and I have been talking about needing to do, and I was watching a fistful of dollars and thinking about a Western screenplay that I have been trying to squeeze out for you know months, um, and just haven't had a new idea for. And an idea popped into my head that was like, what if we take the Yojimbo story arc, which is my favorite narrative arc? I was thinking about this. I'm sure there's a word for what I'm talking about where it's like a piece of jazz that somebody composed it and now a bunch of other artists riff on it.
Yeah,
Anyway, I'm getting on a tangent,
you're
but
okay.
I was thinking about the Yojimbo arc, and I was thinking about how can you make it different? How can you change it? And I was like, well, we kind of had this approach to the Yojimbo arc where we're following the character as he goes from place to place. What if we follow one place as the characters move in and out of it? And anyway, the point is, I was thinking about that, and this idea popped into my head. I went and took a shower and started thinking about how can we build that? What does it look like? And got in my head probably what would end up being like 20 minutes into the movie, and then started thinking about the impending ecological collapse of the world and lost it. So, probably as soon as we're done recording this, I'm gonna write down everything that I thought of, and then in 1, 2, 3 days, I'm gonna open up the file. I'm gonna be like, okay, how can we continue to build on this? And probably there will be nothing. And I will probably sit there going, come on, just get to this. Like, what comes next? How do I build on this?
So
And
I think
uh,
it's interesting to say that like a lot of people struggle with this. A lot of creatives struggle with
yeah,
this kind of like overburden of ideas
yeah,
where you kind of get this like flashpoint of inspiration. You kind of sort out you know somewhere between 25 and 50% of the story, and then it kind of collapses. It kind of falls
yep.
apart. Do you think that a routine would help? Like, is there like something that you wish you could deploy that as far as like a writing routine, like setting realistic goals, like
Yeah.
daily word counts, chapter milestones, self-imposed project deadlines that aren't like in 12 hours I will have a finished screenplay because I need to, right?
Right.
Do you think that would help you, or would you think that would break your process?
I think the problem that we all have is that, of course, it would help, but the conditions to make that work vary so wildly, not just from person to person, but from day to day, hour to hour. And I think some people, those variations are less than others. And for those people, they're able to have a consistent routine. I think that a lot of our more successful writers in our world are people who are not as affected by those variations. And they can sit down and they can tell themselves for 8 hours a day, I sit down at my desk and I write. And the things that I write, I turn into work. And those are people like Stephen King, Ursula Le Guin, who wind up coming up with these tremendous bodies of work because they're able to, because they get to sit there and sit down and think and write, and it works for them. And then there are people like me who the variations are so wild. I have tremendous ADHD. Uh, I have all sorts of daily obstacles and situational hindrances. I that all these things come together, and even within my own brain, as I was saying, it's like I can make the effort to sit down and write. I can do that. The problem is sometimes nothing comes out because I rely so heavily on these flashes of inspiration and taking those flashes of inspiration and stringing things together to create a finished work. And I can't control those flashes of inspiration. No one can. Because if we could, we'd all just be popping all
Right.
day long. You know, oh yeah, I'd love to just have a giant epiphany every 15 minutes. Okay, let's do that. It doesn't work.
Right.
Um,
Do you think that a routine can help create the situations where you can capitalize on those epiphanies when they happen?
I
Or do
think
you?
to some extent, I
Okay.
have found that for me, something that works really well, but not like super consistently, but has given me some really good results, is those stupid writing prompts that you find on the internet where it's like,
Yep.
write write a story where someone's brother has broken their heart. And and a lot of the time I read those writing prompts and my brain has one of those big explosions of inspiration and I think of half of a story based on that sentence and I'm like, "Oh, great." And I write that story and some cool stuff happens. But eventually, it always ends in the brick wall and the evaporation of the stream of ideas. And eventually, I wind up with a really interesting new scrap that ultimately, I think ultimately, a lot of it works to my detriment because what I end up with is so many scraps that I just wish I could string together. And I take too many steps back and I see too much of a universe
Yeah.
of these ideas. And, one of my more frustrating projects and more doomed ideas is a fantasy novel series that doesn't follow, two characters going through a series of situations. It follows an entire world of characters whose stories are not closely connected to each other. And the idea is like, I've got this book and I've got these two characters, and they're walking through a city to meet this objective. As they're walking, they meet this interesting character, and then they go on, and the book continues. Well, book two is that interesting character that they met for 5 pages, and something interesting that happened to that guy 30 years prior to them. And then while he's doing his thing, he meets an interesting character or something interesting happens there, and there's a spin-off from that. And it was largely, I think it's largely inspired by Song of Ice and Fire and
Yeah.
the way Martin created this vast history of an entire continent. And I was like, that's such a great idea. But I still feel like it's kind of limited to 12, main characters and then
Yeah.
10,000 lesser characters.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be just an ultimately sustainable idea to just have an infinite number of characters who you could follow on singular adventures, and some of those adventures tie together in multiple ways, and they all come into this bigger history. But it's too much.
Yeah.
It's too much. And I find myself overloading myself and being too frustrated with the huge amount of dots that I need to connect and just collapsing on myself.
Yeah, yeah. That's, I
And
mean,
I and you know, I think that's my biggest detriment other than ADHD.
yeah. I mean, we all want to create big universes and big
Yeah.
worlds, right? I mean, that's part of why we do what we do.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, I feel you. I mean, look at what I've done with the Soul Saga. I mean,
Yeah.
I have the same problem, right? It's
Yeah.
such a big world that I want to play in nonstop.
Yeah.
So I I think that one of the things that you and I have talked about over the years, I think we were both doing this for a time where we do the random internet writing prompts, and
Yeah.
then we free write in the morning. I know I still do that to this day. Every morning, I that's how I start my day. I generate a random prompt on a story generator site, and they're wild, man. They're like
Yeah.
there are some things that I've written about that I was like, I don't even know what this word means. I've got to go up on Urban Dictionary and figure out what it means, and then I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my god, I'm gonna write a story about this. And then I free write until I can't anymore, and then I track. Well, I started tracking like how many words I do, and how long I sustainably write for. And I think that that's that's one of the things that you and I kind of have in common is we like to kind of mentally train ourselves to be creative, and we try to like brute force ourselves into that space by dropping something random in our lap. And maybe that's the ADHD that we share, where it's just like I can't sit down and just focus on the one thing that I need to do. I need to like look at this shiny thing over here until this distracts me, and then I can turn back to that and do that. So do you do any
And
kind of like progress tracking, or like do you do any kind of like data collection on your writing, like what times you write, how much you write, how long you write for?
I have in the past, because my wife turned me on to NaNoWriMo, and I really wanted to try NaNoWriMo because it seemed like something that might help me by structuring me. Um, and it kind of did, but I liked the fact that every day I would, you know, give it my total word count, and it would tell me this is how many words you wrote, and it would graph the words that I wrote. And I really particularly liked for the first 10 days of NaNoWriMo how it was like, your goal if you want to write a 100,000 word book is to do this, and what you've done is this. And it made me feel really good to see that my little bar on the graph was triple or quadruple, just exponentially exceeding the goal bar. And I was like, I'm so ahead of schedule. I'm awesome. It's fantastic. I'm gonna knock this out of the park. I'm gonna have a whole book in 12 days. And then,
And then you
the drop
plateau.
off.
Yeah.
And and then I never finished it.
Right, right.
Um,
But
some
do you think those little like micro goals, like like if you do 3,000 words a day, you'll have a 90,000 word book at the end of this month. You think those micro goals help you? Like instead of like, oh, I've got to write a 100,000 page novel, just saying like, hey, I've got to write 2,500 words a day.
To me, they feel, and this is maybe not like a good answer because this might be a result of a problem rather than me being like, anyway, to me they feel kind of constrictive
Okay.
when people talk about I write 1,000 words a day and then I stop. I feel internally kind of claustrophobic thinking about that because
I do
like
too.
if I reach 1,000 words and I'm still going, I want to keep going.
Absolutely.
And it I worry, part of it is that I worry so much about stopping and then losing the momentum.
Yep.
And honestly, I should do an experiment and see, because that fear of losing the momentum is based so much on what I've talked about, the way I rely on these explosions of inspiration. Maybe if I limited the explosions a little bit more and allowed things to process over a longer period of time, and stewing is a lot of what I do, and I know that. Maybe if I forced myself to spend a lot more time stewing on something that I can already see as being a full thing, maybe I would find that the full thing ends up being more full. I should try it sometime.
Yeah, I'd be curious
And
to hear what the results of that would be.
yeah, and I will say something you said earlier got me thinking about this, and I want to talk about it. I think it's an important thing for me, and maybe it's important for your podcast and everything. I'm a really collaborative person, as you know,
Yep.
because I prefer collaborating precisely because what ends up happening a lot of the time is I hit a wall, the person I'm collaborating with gets me through that wall, and they hit a wall, I help them get through the wall. And I think the reason you and I work well together is that our getting through our walls kind of come pretty generally at different times, and we're
Staggered,
good at
yeah.
getting each other through walls. And we have in the past had a problem where our whole project hits a wall and then neither of us can get us out of it. That is a thing.
It
But
happens.
I really value the collaborative process and the way having someone else look at my idea and go, okay, well here's where you're right. Here's where you've painted yourself into a corner. And to have someone else, and do the same thing for them, I really value it. And if you don't mind, can I talk about Soul a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
and
please
the
do.
process
Of
that we've
course.
engaged in?
Absolutely.
I came into Soul 6 years into the project, and you had been developing it with some other people, and you guys had been doing all this crazy shit like taking astrophysics classes to learn the mechanics of orbital combat,
Yep.
and I had a lot of catching up to do in some regards, and in other regards, I think that the reason I ended up being useful for that project was because as an outside perspective, I was able to come in and get you guys through some of those walls. And some of the walls that you had to do with things that I'm really experienced in that you guys weren't as experienced in necessarily.
Yep.
Like I remember specifically, I tell this story when I'm talking about Soul a lot because it's an interesting thing how Spaulding as a character, when you guys came to me with what you had written so far, Spaulding's character was a badass pilot, and that was him.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, what next? And you guys were like, we don't know. He's a badass pilot, and he's really cool. What can we do with him? And I found it really fun that my position then became, well, let's come up with as many like arcs for this character as we can, and see what sticks. And I really like the see what sticks method. I like to write variations on a theme,
Yep.
and you know I think I would be a better staff writer than a showrunner because I'm really good at variations. But when I start trying to pick, I freeze up because I got to pick exactly the right one. I've got to pick the right.
Right. It's that idea of like infinite possibilities, right? Like
Yeah,
if you're faced
yeah,
with infinity,
yeah,
I can't decide. I have to make a
yeah,
decision, and that's the one.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a lot of what I do is write the same scene 30 different ways. You know this because I always
Yep.
email you 30 different versions of a scene, and they can be wildly varied or they can be almost word for word the same, except
Just
like
one little.
this character's a little crankier in this one, and
Yep.
it kind of builds the scene in a different direction. And I'm sure that's very frustrating for
No,
you.
no. Actually, I love it. I think it's great. I do similar things. I mean, dude, I in the previous episode I was talking to Amy. I collaborated with her on a book, and I wrote an entire novel just to
Yeah,
throw it away and say, "Yeah, I don't like this one. I'm going to write it
yeah,
again."
yeah,
So, yeah, I'm much the same way. I think you've got a better handle on doing it at a smaller scale, where you'll work a scene 30, 40, 50 times and then
yeah,
present ideas.
yeah,
Um, and then usually we don't pick one, we pick like five of our favorites and we kind of mash them together into one,
yeah,
which I think one of the things that you have mastered is character voice. I think that
Thank
you
you.
really kind of drill into character voice in a way that is very unique, and that's probably part of your process,
For
or
sure.
it's a result of your process. In that you're not just making one character; you're making 50 variations of a character, literally instant by instant or scene by scene within your story, and then finding the path that weaves it together into a believable character, which is very unique, and very good. So I applaud you for that.
Thank
Um,
you.
and with Spalding in particular, it was like you were the one who was like, well, Lisa Colt and Spalding are, I mean, that I see chemistry there, and everybody was like, and we're talking about Soul, the TV pilot, which was a,
Yeah.
a highly collaborative kind of thing. So
To clarify, I not like romantic chemistry,
no,
but
no, no.
character chemistry, because I I think we all agreed the idea of them being romantically involved was a no-go due to the age difference and all that. But yeah, like, and I think the chemistry that you're referring to has a lot to do with exactly what you're talking about with the way I work, which
Yeah,
is character relationship
yeah,
and how these two push and pull against each other, and that drives an arc. And
right. That like
I
healthy, unhealthy
yeah,
competition,
yeah,
respect,
yeah,
anger,
yeah,
resentment. Like very
yeah.
complex emotions at play there.
Um, am I allowed to talk about like scrapped arcs in the Soul universe or like things that were proposed that never happened? Because there's something
What specifically?
pertaining to this conversation that I'd like to talk
What?
about, I find very interesting, but
Okay.
that ultimately, well, I really liked the idea of the arc where Spalding and Colt are going off, and there's the question of like, are they going to side with the Protectorate or the Martian rebel faction? Um, and I really liked one of the arcs that we ended up scrapping was that it looks like they're going in the same direction, and then ultimately they don't.
Yeah.
And, it ended with Colt siding with the Protectorate and like selling Spalding out
Yeah.
and, getting him imprisoned, if not killed. And I thought that was just the most tragic and wonderful direction those two characters could take.
Yeah.
And, ultimately we didn't go with it. I don't know if, as you continue writing the books, if you're going to get to that, the point where in the story where that was like a proposal. I don't know,
We'll
but
get there. We'll definitely get to that area. I don't. I'm obviously not going to spoil anything, but I mean, everything in the Soul Saga universe is tragic at some
yeah,
point. So,
yeah,
because that's just reality.
yeah. But I think that the reason I'm bringing that up is that that speaks a lot to uh, the character-driven, collaborative team writing
Yep.
that we're talking about, which is like, you know, one person sees the arc going this way, another person sees the arc not going that way. And is there a middle ground? Are there pieces that can be strung together? And like one person, the conclusion that ends up being reached is something that one person would never have landed on, and the other person would never have landed on. And that collaboration for someone like me is crucial
Yeah.
for that reason. Um, and I think that finding someone you work with in that way is crucial because I've tried to collaborate with a lot of people who I did not have that synergy with.
Yeah.
And I can't place what that X factor is that makes it work. I haven't yet figured that out, probably because it's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
You've been there for some of these failed collaborations
Yeah.
where the other person who we bring in on a project isn't even a bad writer, isn't even a bad person, isn't even a bad collaborator. It's just the way the direction they're going is incongruous with the direction we want to go, and there's no way to mesh them.
Right. I think a lot of that has to do with like life experience, right? Like,
Yeah.
you and I have experienced a lot of similar things, so that we can be presented with a situation and
Yeah.
be like, oh, this is bad. This is all
Yeah.
bad. This character needs to flee from the situation. The other characters, and the other writer might be like, why is it bad? I don't understand. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
a suitcase arrived on their doorstep. It could be full of money, and we're like, no, it's a bomb. 100% it's a bomb, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it might also be in a certain way like the cohesiveness of our neurodivergence,
For sure.
as our brains are seeing 100 different directions that the thing can go.
Yeah.
This other person's brain might be seeing 100 different ones or one different one.
Right.
But the important thing becomes that the directions they're seeing don't match at all with the directions we're seeing, and that's a consequence of, like I said, different kinds of neurodivergence or
Yeah.
and your life experience, I think, comes into it, because we see like this is where this story is headed, and someone with different life experience goes, no, that's not where that story goes. It goes
Right.
in this way. What are you talking about?
Right.
I can't imagine the story going in the direction that you guys are going, so I'm kind of lost.
Right. And that happens quite a bit actually in collaborations.
Yeah.
So
And even within individuals, I think.
oh yeah, for sure.
For
For sure.
I go, it has to go in this direction, and my brain goes, I don't see how. And I'm like, well, find a way to make it how. And my brain's like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, you know what you should write? You should write a different story about a different person.
Right. You need a comedy. That's what
Yeah.
you need right now.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
This is too gritty. Write something funny.
Right. Right. All right. Cool. Well, Dano, it's been awesome having you on. And is there any like parting advice or parting wisdom you can tell anybody who might be trying to get a routine established? What you've faced a lot of challenges. You've overcome a lot of those. You have a lot of ideas burning a hole in the back of your head. What parting wisdom would you throw out there?
I when you asked me to be on this podcast, I knew this question was coming, and I really wanted to be able to answer it. And I think that some parts of my brain came up with an answer, and I can't remember them now.
Perfect.
I think ultimately, I think the best thing that a person can do is, if you're stuck, find a different approach. And, I write something by myself and I get stuck, and I try a different approach to writing it and I get stuck. And eventually I start throwing it to other people and being more collaborative, and we get stuck. And, I think just approaching it from different directions, and finding as many ways to approach from wildly different directions as possible, and eventually you circle the drain, I think.
Okay. That's
But
good.
I don't know.
That's good. I mean, I think that the approach is important for sure. I think the two biggest hurdles for any creative, regardless of what it is approach and accountability, right? Like, figure out how you're going to approach the issue, and then try to be accountable for doing the thing, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, Dano, thank you so much. I'm sure we're going to be
pleasure.
in conversation here shortly. I actually want to pitch you about some Pirate King offshoots
Yeah.
for
Let's talk.
for the
Let's
Soul
talk
Saga.
Pirate Kid.
Right on, brother. All right.
All right.
Thank you again.
Take it easy.
Bye. All right, so that was Dano Colon. I mean, you can see he and I work together so well because we're very similarly wired. We didn't even talk about video games. I mean, one of the things that we share a lot of our time with is we pound the keys as hard as we can, and we get stuck, and then it's like, let's go play some Rust. Let's go play some PAX Day. Let's go, play some Rocket League. And then we'll goof off for 30 or 40 minutes, take a little mental break, and then one of us inevitably will be like, oh, I know how to fix it. And we dive off the game, we jump back into the project, and we rock and roll. I mean, I think that that's just the plight of the creative, right? It's just a matter of finding the way that you work, right? Your routine, and then once you have that routine, setting realistic goals. And a lot of the things that I think that setting goals can do for you is to avoid burnout, right? Like pushing an entire novel up a hill or a screenplay or whatever creative thing you're doing, it's a big lift. It's not easy. I mean, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So it, breaking it down into small bite-sized pieces and saying, hey, I'm going to do 3,000 words a day. I'm going to do 1,000 words a day, and making those goals how you get your dopamine hit, right? Just like Amy, like I'm not going to let myself eat until I get my 500 words in. I think but allowing yourself the flexibility to be creative, be in the moment, make words, but pick the projects. Maybe it's 100 words across 5 projects. I mean, that's a lot how I write, in that if I'm not feeling funny, I'll write sci-fi. So, I right now, on this screen that I'm recording on right now currently, I have 6 different genres and mediums of projects open. It's nuts. I mean, I feel crazy half the time. So, it's about overcoming those challenges. Dano and I have faced some pretty impressive challenges together creatively, where projects were just spun completely out of control, and there were too many cooks in the kitchen, and we were the two that had our heads down, going, I just want to write, I just want to get this project done. And if we can overcome those things, then you can overcome the challenges that you're facing, and you can definitely get some words on the page. So, as always, keep writing, keep pushing, and remember, it's the ink and the effort that brings stories to life. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow us on social media platforms for more tips and inspiration. James Fox, thanks, and keep on putting words down.